So we are here in our 6th week of a series based on the book The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And I know for myself that in this journey of this series that there have been a lot of instances where I have been able to recognize something that has been inside of me that I hadn't even realized was inside there, because it's getting pinged from things outside of me. And the beautiful thing about this journey, I think, is that it helps us to recognize it's not about what's outside of us, that it really is about what's inside of us. And we have the opportunity to heal that. And that's incredibly powerful. Now, with Michael Singer, what one of my big takeaways is that he is really wanting us to understand that we are not this, and we are not what our mind thinks that we are, that we are this, this wonderful consciousness. And we have forgotten this because we have taken on all these other things that we believe about ourselves. And that's absolutely normal in our life to do that. So I want to share with you now, a lot of what I share with you and what I have been sharing with you comes directly from the book, because it's important to me that you're really hearing what he's saying. And then obviously I am embellish on that. But first of all, I want to share with you some various quotes that pertain to what we've already talked about. Eventually, you will see that the real cause of problem is not life itself. It's the commotion that the mind makes about life that really causes the problems. We can agree with that? The day you decide that you are more interested in being aware of your thoughts than you are in the thoughts themselves, that is the day that you will find your way out. And we talk about this a lot, that one of the most important journeys that we make is to wake up and become aware. Wake up and become aware. There is nothing more important to true growth than realizing that you are not the voice of your mind. You are the one who hears it. The natural ups and downs of life can either generate personal growth or create personal fears. Which of these dominate is completely dependent on how we view change. It's completely dependent on what we are choosing. In order to be who you are, you must be willing to let go of who you think you are. And when a problem is disturbing, don't ask, what should I do about it? Ask, what part of me is being disturbed by this? That is so incredibly powerful. What part of me is being disturbed by this? So Michael says that if you explore consciousness, which is your pure sense of awareness, you'll see that it really doesn't exist in any particular point in time or space, but rather it's a field of awareness that focuses down to a point by concentrating on a set of objects or on objects. So in other words, we can be aware of our finger, or we can be aware of our finger and our entire body at the same time. Or we can be aware of a thought, or we can be aware of a thought and things that are going on around us. So it focuses down to an object or a set of objects at a time. He says consciousness is a dynamic field of awareness that has the ability to either narrowly focus or broadly expand. And when we are narrowly focused, we are no longer in the broader expansiveness of consciousness. And this is where we want to get to more, is this broader expansiveness of consciousness. He says it no longer experiences itself as a field of pure consciousness. It begins to relate itself more to the objects that it's focused on. So I love this because for me, it's like, before we come into this body, we are this big spirit, whatever you want to think of that as. And then consciousness itself focuses down narrowly into into this body, into what we have come into in this world. And then I believe that when we first come into this world, we're pretty pure, we're pretty open, and then life happens, doesn't it? And family influences us, and all these other things influence us. But in the greater realm, we are this, and that's, I think, what he's trying to get us to remember, is that we are this greater expansiveness. And we've simply forgotten it. And so we want to start remembering that and living more from that awareness. He says that your sense of self is determined by where you are focusing your consciousness. And what determines where we focus our consciousness? Well, initially, it's our family of origin, it's our parents, it's our siblings, it's our school, our teachers, our friends, our peers. Perhaps if we went to church, it's a dynamic of religion and our culture. And so that determines our focus of consciousness. So, in other words, we learn to be who we are. And so he said, to kind of get an idea of this, just imagine that you're in this vast inner space and there's just kind of nothingness. And then imagine thought forms coming by, and maybe it's a pear and a basketball and a color. And so we just see these things going by, but then we bring one object into our mind. So let's say we bring the pear. And we think about the pear, and we start focusing on the pear, and pretty soon it's like the energy slows down, and that pear becomes the focus of our consciousness until it's almost still in time and space. And that's what happens in life, is that's exactly what happens in life. And it happens, and again, when you look at growing up, that's how we learned. We learned that there's, we didn't even know there were choices growing up. Did we? Most of us didn't know there were choices. We just took on what we were taught to believe. But I think that there are some people who came into this world and they were questioners. And Wayne Dyer called these scurvy elephants. And the scurvy elephant is, he said that when he was in school that his teachers told him that he was a scurvy elephant. Well, what she said was he was a disturbing element. And and he heard it as scurvy elephant, and he was very proud of the fact that he was a scurvy elephant because he was a questioner, because he didn't just buy into, what was. And so I have to believe that everybody here, in our own way, we're scurvy elephants, or we probably wouldn't be sitting in a unity church. Okay. He says that the very act of differentiating the amount of awareness focused on one particular object over any other causes clinging. And the result of clinging is that selective thoughts and emotions stay in one place long enough to become the building blocks of the psyche. And, you notice that today's title is called, Are You a Klingon? And, of course, most of us probably remember Star Trek and the Klingons, and it has nothing to do with that. I just want you to know I thought it was a cute title and a play on the Klingon. Okay, so clinging creates the bricks and mortar which we build as the concept of self. And in the vast inner space, using nothing but the vapor of our thoughts. I love how he says this. In the midst of vast inner space, using nothing but our thoughts, we created a structure of apparent solidity to rest our head on. And we say, this is me. This is me. And for the majority of us, it has been so unconscious. It has been, again, what we have learned that is us. And we said, this is me. And he said that who you are is lost in that, and you'll never find your true essence in this, because this is not your true essence. It's who you were told that you should be, or what we have believed through our experiences, even as we have gotten older. And we literally base our identity on what it is that we believe. I believe in God, or I don't believe in God. I believe that the change of seasons is a wonderful thing. I believe the change of seasons is a horrible thing. We base our identities based on what it is that we believe. And I love how he says this. He says, but it is not who you are. It is just the thoughts you have pulled around yourself in an attempt to define yourself. It's just the thoughts that we have. It's like this clothing, we have put on this costume that says this is who I am, and this is what I'm about. And he said we're all clinging and building. That's just a normal thing in our society, that we're clinging and building. And here's the thing too, that in most cultures, we are rewarded for wrapping ourselves with the thought structures of what the culture needs for us to be. And if we show up differently, whether it's a family structure, a school structure, a church structure, a neighborhood, whatever it is, if we begin to show up differently than that, then we are punished, not necessarily physically, but we are punished mentally, emotionally. We are judged and we are rejected. We are not accepted. And so our tendency is to want to wrap that back around us because, and how many of us are familiar with Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz? Yeah, he talks a lot about this. And we don't want to be rejected. It's hard to be rejected. And yet I really believe that that scurvy elephant in us is like, it's that louder voice that's saying, but I can't stay here. I can't stay. How confining is that? How confining is it to be in that structure? And yet that's where we've been for so long. And it's time for us to break out of that structure. And we have the opportunity to do this. Let's see. Oh, and he also talked about recognize how easy it is and how accepting you are of people who fit your structure. And, because like when people show up and they fit your structure, it kind of keeps you solid and steady. But then think about people who show up in your life and they don't fit your structure. Do we deal with that on a daily basis? Absolutely. And what do? Before we even know it, we're pulling away. We're judging. We're making them wrong. And we're not accepting them. And this is so much what this is about, because the thing that we need the most at this point in time especially is we need connection. And we need oneness. We need communication. And we need to move beyond this separation. But we can't wait for somebody else to do that. This is our journey to start letting these structures down so that we can be more present to people who are different from us, to things that are different from us. Okay, so he says that so here's what I want to say here. When I was really sitting with this, I thought about, can you imagine if you were raised in a culture where prejudice, it was just the name of the game, and strong prejudice. And what many times comes out of that is white supremacy, homophobics, a discounting of women, all kinds of things like that. But the thing that really got me as I was thinking about this is that, I know for me, when I see that, I have to admit, it angers me. It's hard to see people, spewing such venomous things. And it's easy to hate. And then at the same time, though, when somebody is spewing that hate, to give that back is not the answer at all. And when we can step back and we can see in our own lives how we have taken this whole identity on based upon everything that we have learned, that we have taken in as truth, can we also see that people who are that unlike us, it's the same thing. And I shared the story last week about the white supremacist who was, spewing this venomous stuff, and the younger man of color, and how this younger man kept saying, why do you hate me? Why do you hate me? And kept asking for a hug. And finally, the white supremacist guy hugged him, and they ended up hugging a few times. And again, he said, why do you hate me? And the white supremacist finally said, I don't know. And that's the thing that we have to look at, is that most people are walking around with no idea. We have no idea why we believe what we believe. We have no idea why we have the prejudices or don't have the prejudices that we have. If we aren't awake and aware enough, that's just how we show up. And so can we see that that's the same for somebody who's so unlike us? And as long as we keep our armor up, as long as we say, oh, you're bad, you're wrong, we can't even have a conversation. But when we can ourselves step back and recognize, no, wait a second here. Wait a second. What if I stepped out of stepped into some uncomfortableness and I started a conversation? And I started a conversation in which I really desired to have a conversation. And I really desired to listen. And I sincerely believe that most of the time, we would, I don't want to say understand each other. I think that we would both learn a lot from each other. And sometimes that's not going to happen. And we have to be okay with that, because just like us, sometimes when we get hit and our defenses come up and we dig our heels in and boom, sometimes other people are going to do that. And we just have to love anyway. And we have to clean our own stuff up. I thought about how do you react when somebody gives you, positive criticism? I can't think of the word I want, but thank you. Constructive criticism. Are you like, thank you. Bring it on. That is so wonderful. Most of the time we get defensive because it's hitting our stuff. But the opportunity that we always have, and this is something I've learned, and I've had to learn in ministry, because there's a lot of people that believe a lot of different things about who I should be, how I should be showing up, what I should be doing. And I've learned throughout the years to sometimes that initial thing comes up like, whoa, but I'm aware enough now to go, okay, is there something here for me? And, sometimes there is. Sometimes there's something I can go, oh, okay, just to be able to listen and soften up. And sometimes it's not. And I recognize that's not mine, and that's somebody else's, and that's okay. But it's only when we allow ourselves to soften. And that's so much of what this is about, allowing ourselves to soften enough that we can be present to somebody who is unlike us and with a real desire to get to know them. Because you know what? We're all just people. We're all just people. It's interesting. Paul was telling me that years ago he went to this wedding, and he ended up sitting with this couple, and Jim and Lynn, was it? And he said, initially, his initial reaction was, oh, this is just a poor Ozark couple. And he got to talking to them. And she said something about she had owned a Christian bookstore and how the college wanted to bring her. And he's like, because he deals in textbooks, so he's giving advice on how, it's a great idea. There's great money in that. And it'll be a great thing. And so a little bit later, he found out that this was actually Jim and Lynn Walton, son of Sam Walton, Walmart, 5th richest man in the world at that time. My point in that being that, and he's giving advice on how to make money in the bookstore business. My point being is that if he had known that, how different would we react if we knew, oh my gosh, we're in the presence of like a billionaire, 5th, richest man in the world. My point being is that there's all these things that come up for us that keep us separate. And we have to start recognizing those things, because people are just people. That was the thing. It's like, we're just people. We're just people. And when we can start connecting with each other as a person, not as a Democrat, not as a Republican, not as rich, not as educated, not as a male or a female, not as whatever, when we can start connecting as person to person, that's what's going to change our world. That certainly is what is going to change our country. And we need that, right? Right. But we can't wait for somebody else to do it. We have to do it now. Exactly. And we have to do the work that is ours to do, because it takes effort, doesn't it? But it's so worth it. It's absolutely worth it. Ephesians 4:22 to 24 says, to put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires. Okay, some of this biblical stuff cracks me up. And to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. And it's like, what it's saying is that let's put off this old self. Scripture says, when you were a child, you acted like a child, you spoke like a child, but now that you're an adult, put away those childish things. Now that we're adults, now that we're here and we're consciously aware, we no longer have an excuse. We no longer have an excuse to keep showing up the way we've always been showing up. We no longer have an excuse to say, this is just who I am, this is how I was raised. No. We are called to something higher. And this whole thing about putting on the likeness of God, it's remembering who we are. It's remembering that we are the essence of love. We are the essence of oneness and kindness. We are the essence of compassion and oneness. We are that. And we are being called in a bigger way now to be that. In the biggest way right now to be that. The world needs us right now to remember that and to be willing. And to be willing to let this stuff fall away. I love that picture of it just falling away so that the real self, the true essence of us, can be what shines forth. So how do we do this? Well, he talks about relaxing. He says the best way to do this is through non-resistance, that when things come up and they're in front of us and we're feeling that and we're triggered, that instead of pulling away, instead of moving into reaction, that we're awake and aware enough in the moment to say, I need to take a breath here. And I need to relax into this. And I need to be present. And so one of the things, and Dee put this in her meditation, but when we were in conference a couple weeks ago was heart math, and I shared last week that I'm so excited about this. I'm in process of reading. I can't wait to bring this to our community. But I want to do just this little process that we can do, and we can do this over and over until it becomes the norm for us. And all that it is that we're going to breathe, and we're not going to breathe exaggerated, just a little exaggerated. And we're going to breathe in and through our heart space. So we're going to literally feel the breath coming and going through our heart space. And then I'm going to invite you to bring something into your mind that brings just a smile to your heart. That it could be, an animal. It could be your partner. It could be a child. It could be a flower. It could be whatever. And then we're going to just breathe there for a few seconds and feel that. So we're going to practice this for a moment, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So I'm going to invite you, if you'd like to do this, to close your eyes. And then just allow yourself to breathe. I like to put my hand on my heart. It just helps me to breathe in and through it. And not big breaths, but a little more than usual. So let's just do that. And allowing yourself to feel breathing through your heart. And now bring something into your awareness that just makes you smile, brings you joy, makes your heart smile, and keep breathing in and through your heart. And then just bring yourself back. Isn't it beautiful to hear that beautiful little voice in the midst of that? So here's the thing about this is that what's happening in those moments is, and there's graphs that I will ultimately be able to show you, but before we did that, our heart rate was kind of erratic. When you go into this, your heart rate becomes what's called coherent. And you'll be able to actually see the rhythms and how coherent it is. When we are in the state of coherence, we are open. We are receptive. We are relaxed. We are present. And when we're not in that state, it's harder for us to be there. And the thing about this is, like, on the global, not just global, but really even so beyond, what this does for everything will blow your mind when I finally get to share it all with you. But this is something that we can practice, and practice this over and over and over again until it becomes something where when you get triggered, when somebody shows up or something happens and you're that you remember, okay, take a step back, and breathe and bring yourself back into that. And you will be able to be present to the person, to the situation, to whatever's going on in a much broader, more expansive way. And that's always going to make things better, right? That's always going to make things better. To be able to be with each other in the connection of our hearts, that's what's going to heal the world. That is what's going to heal the world, is to be able to do that. He says that deep inner release is a spiritual path in and of itself. It is the path of non-resistance, the path of acceptance, the path of surrender. If you have difficulty doing this, don't get down on yourself. Just keep working at it. It's the work of a lifetime to become that open, that complete, and that whole. And I love that. It's always that reminder. We're not always going to be there, are we? And that's okay. Just get up and do it again. That's what that's about. And then if you do this, you will start to feel an enormous amount of love, more than you've ever felt before. You will feel more peace and contentment, and eventually nothing will ever disturb you again. Imagine that. And the thing is, I think we can get there to where we can finally be to that place where I have such a clarity and a purity that we can finally step back and go, you know what? It's okay. And I sincerely believe that we can get there. Staying open is what the great saints and masters throughout all ages have talked about. And we have the opportunity to do that and to be present to that. So your homework for this week, if you decide to do it, is simply to work with this heart math. Work with breathing in through your heart space, bringing something into that space that feels good, and getting into that coherent state as much as you can. And then throughout your day, when things come up to challenge you, and will they? Yeah. Multiple times a day, that's our opportunity then to practice. Practice on the small stuff. Practice when somebody cuts you off in traffic. Practice when somebody that's waiting on you isn't necessarily being present with you. Practice on somebody in your family who's being irritable. Practice on that. And the beautiful thing that he says about this is every time that we do this, it teaches the deeper essence of us to be that more often. And so it's so worth it. It's so worth it. So have fun practicing this week. I'm so excited about this material. I'm so excited about what we're doing together. Thank you for being on this journey all together. And namaste. Namaste.